2008. May we have the roll call for the City Council, please?
Council members: Draymond.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Yusefian.
Here.
Mayor Najarian.
Here. And
Redevelopment Agency.
For the redevelopment. Roll call.
Thank you. Let's have the roll call for the agency, please.
Agency members: Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Yusefian.
Here.
Chairman Draymond.
Here.
May we have your report, please?
The agenda for the January 8th, 2008 joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Redevelopment Agency was posted on Thursday, January 3rd, 2008 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Will you read the first item?
Public hearing, Director of Development Services regarding the proposed mixed-use project, City Center 2, to be located at 141 North Brand Boulevard. 1A is an ordinance for introduction authorizing the execution of a development agreement by and between the City of Glendale and 111 North Brand Boulevard, LLC.
This is a public hearing, and I will open the public hearing. Mr. Lansafane.
Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council and Redevelopment Agency, I'd like to ask Ms. Van Meiden just to give a quick introduction or preamble to our staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Lansafane. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, Chair, members of the Redevelopment Agency, I earlier today received a facsimile notice from Mr. John Henning, who is counsel for Mr. Milano and also for Conquest Student Housing, among others, who submitted a comment letter on the City Center 2 EIR that was certified by the agency and the City Council on December 18th, 2007. In that letter, Mr. Henning alleges that neither he nor Mr. Milano received notification of the December 18th meeting, and is requesting that the City Council Redevelopment Agency set aside the certification and the entitlement approvals that were given on that date, as well as not consider the entitlement that is before you for introduction today, the ordinance to introduce the development agreement for City Center 2. In responding to that facsimile letter that I received this morning, I did provide some information to the Council in written form. We as well did also receive additional comments from Mr. Milano just prior to the commencement of this joint meeting. And the bulk of the comments have to do with the adequacy or the lack of notice that was provided. And in the information that I provided to you, I did bullet point to you the various notices that were provided pursuant to law for the commencement of the December 18th meeting, as well as the introduction of this development agreement ordinance today. And I will confirm to you that those notifications, which include publication in the news press as required by law, posting of the site, posting at 3 conspicuous locations, City Hall, the entrance to the City Council chambers, as well as on our website, and notification to 300-foot radius surrounding the site, as well as to a list of interested parties. That list including Mr. Milano, 2 addresses. One of the letters was returned, the other was not. According to law, a notification is presumed received once it is mailed. We did not receive return on both of those mailed notifications to the list. Mr. Henning notes in his letter that he did not receive notification. Under CEQA law, requested notice must be in writing. I have reviewed the materials that were submitted by Mr. Henning, which included his extensive comment letter, which is part of the record, and was responded to in the comments in the final EIR, responses to comments. We did not receive a written request from Mr. Henning that he be provided with specific notice. I will note for the Council and the agency that Mr. Milano's client did receive written notice, as well as all of the other required notifications pursuant to the Brown Act and pursuant to CEQA law.
Mr. Henning's client.
Yeah, you meant Mr. Henning's client.
I meant Mr. Henning's client. Thank you for the
notice.
clarification. I want to get through this information quickly so that you can move on to your consideration. I will also note that the compliance standard for CEQA with respect to the notification compliance with requests to receive notices, specifically what the section is called, is substantial compliance. And what it says is this, specifically, that the section concerning requests to receive notice may not be construed in any manner that results in the invalidation of an action because of the failure of a person to receive a requested notice. Provided that there has been substantial compliance with the requirements of this section, I submit to you that based on the full compliance of the city and the agency in providing notice of proper under the Brown Act as well as under CEQA law, that substantial compliance with the notice requirements has been met, and therefore, as counsel, I would recommend that you are under no obligation to consider any additional comments on the EIR, which was certified on December 18th, and that you are free to move forward with your consideration of the development agreement, which was considered in the EIR that you certified on December 18th. Also, in the second part of the blue letter that was submitted today to the city clerk and distributed to you, there was a secondary issue pertaining to request for recusal of one of the city council members, and Mr. Howard will be addressing that issue specifically.
Mr. Howard?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. In the blue letter submitted by Mr. Milano, he cites Government Code Section 84308 for the proposition that at least one council member may have a conflict of interest because they've received campaign contributions from a party or a participant seeking a license or other discretionary approval before the city council. That section I've referred to in the past as sometimes being the Planning Commission section, because I'm aware of planning commissioners in other cities that have actually been ensnared by this section while they were running for public office. The section specifically exempts from the definition of agencies that are affected or impacted by the section those agencies where individuals are elected directly by the voters. In other words, city councils are exempt. And what you have before you today is an action by the city council. Acting in your capacity as city council members, you're exempt from the section. So the section does not have application in the matter before you today.
And the redevelopment agency is not taking official action?
The redevelopment agency is here it has no authority, both by state law and for purposes today. It's really just a joint meeting. It is not a joint powers authority, as some of the examples Mr. Milano provides in his handout. It is here only for purposes of, if there were agency action, it might be a different story. There is not. It's really just a joint meeting.
I mean, it's very interesting. In another case, let's roll back the clock 2 months, where we were dealing perhaps with a redevelopment agency issue where we were giving entitlements. Would that, I mean, at that point, would any one of us had a conflict if we were to have received $250 or more from an applicant?
Possibly. I've sent a memo out about 6 to 8 months ago involving this. Actually, it was longer. I'm sorry. It goes back to the time when I first did the presentation on AB 1234 ethics, and I did a memorandum to members of the council about this section, and it's not an unknown section. It's been around for some time. It's difficult because one issue, for example, is Mr. Milano raises that they've received campaign contributions from 4 different entities. I don't know if any of those entities are true subsidiaries or they're controlled by the corporate entity that's got or a corporate entity or otherwise that has a partnership or other interest in the matter before you today. I can't speculate, and I won't speculate on that, nor will I engage in any hypothetical discussions other than to point out that the section could apply to housing authorities and redevelopment agencies.
I'm going to go slightly off track and request perhaps that we put on the agenda at one of our future meetings, maybe a joint meeting with redevelopment and council, is that on the MTA board, for example, they screen well in advance any type of contributions. They review our Form 460s, screen any possible contributions from contractors, subcontractors, or property developers, and give us a notice in advance that you may have a potential conflict. Check, this isn't legal advice, but please check. We have a red flag here. And, I mean, I'm just thinking back, and I know that it hasn't been at the front of my mind when I'm serving as an agency member, redevelopment agency, or housing authority about, did I receive any contribution from this subcontractor or this material supplier? And I don't think any one of us wants to get in any trouble, so perhaps that's something we could put on, perhaps create a new level of scrutiny for council, agency, housing authority, so we just can avoid these type of problems that we may wander into unknowingly.
Well, from my perspective, I think that's an excellent idea. What we've done is essentially, we don't, in our office, I know the city clerk doesn't as well, we don't track the campaign contributions that are noted in forms in your filings during the election cycle, and as a result, we rely on you to come forward and let us know where you think you might have an issue. So it's clearly probably not a bad idea to look at that. There's going to be reference to this section in the upcoming campaign contribution report that relates to contributions from contractors, licensees, and applicants as well. So that can be part of the
Because
discussion
this
as well.
could very well have been me on this blue sheet, had I been running for council this past go-round. And it certainly is not something that I was even considering or having.
And you used the appropriate term, and that is scrutinize. We haven't, obviously, in our office, and I don't think any others have had an opportunity to scrutinize any of this to determine, are these true participants, or an arm of the participant, or are they completely separate entities, which would not even take us to the exemption.
Right. I wouldn't want an extended vacation outside of Glendale for violating any of these rules. Would anyone support that? Getting a little more review on that and making sure we don't stumble into.
Well, Mr. Mayor, this is, in all due respect, this is the first time I'm understanding that, if I heard Mr. Howard correctly, that the agency and the housing authority is going to be covered under this section?
Memorandum I indicated back under AB 1234, I indicated possibly yes.
Possibly, yes.
Is it possibly yes, or is it yes?
More than likely, yes, but I haven't researched it in depth to make sure that you are or you aren't. This is a section that I think I've referred to in the past as being the Planning Commission section.
I understand that. I know the Planning Commission,
you're aware of it.
because I've dealt with it several
you're aware
times.
of
Is there any way we can get a correction or an understanding from FPPC on this?
We can do that.
Because
but-
we do make decisions on housing authority
Right.
all the time. We approve affordable housing projects. Some of those individuals have contributed to campaigns. So, I mean, I'm not going to deny that, but I don't know all of that stuff. So it's very important for us to know for sure if this is the case, and within 12 months, then this is no longer the Planning Commission item anymore. It is anything but the City Council or elected position. So housing and agency, which is an appointed, basically, because the City Council appointed themselves to those agencies, then at that point, that becomes covered under this. If that's the case, I need to know, because I'm no fool. I know whom, and I can go back and look at my 460 forms.
Because we have issues coming up almost every meeting that
Have staff review it.
may have application.
We'll get you an opinion.
Also, we're getting into this. It's 2008. Within a couple of few months, you're going to walk into the election cycle again, and so we need to know. And when it says within 12 months,
Months in a 3-month period after the decision is made as
Right.
well.
So that's going to have an issue.
We'll be done.
Okay, that was addressing the second point. The first point regarding the notice, and let me just open that up for discussion. The claim is that Mr. Milano, upon request for specific notice, did not receive specifics. Ms. Van Meiden indicates that 2 letters went out, 1 was returned, 1 presumably was not returned, and the mail rule is upon mailing, it's considered delivered.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I will also note that the request that you see as an attachment to Mr. Henning's letter is an email request. And what actually CEQA does address requests that pertain to emails. And our process is that we have a list, we receive written requests from individuals to be placed on an interested parties list, and we traditionally do, and what we have done by matter of precedent, is to mail the notices. We don't offer and haven't offered email blast of notices to individuals that make such requests. If there's such a policy that's developed in the future, we could do that, but at this point in time, and as of the date of the request for this notice, we proceeded pursuant to our normal process, and that was to do regular mailing, which we did. And CEQA says that we aren't obligated to provide notice by email if so requested, only if the agency offers such notice service, which we don't at this point in time.
Now, if we move forward, are we subject to challenge? I misplaced the letter, but was there an indication that they would seek court intervention should we proceed and introduce the ordinance?
Yes. In fact, in the blue letter that was delivered today, it's paragraph 5. My attorney will be filing a complaint with regard to the possible violations of CEQA law regarding violation of proper notification to parties of interest. The statute of limitations is open. The notice of determination was filed on the 19th of December. It's 35 days.
And not to give legal advice, but that would take the form of an injunction, perhaps, halting the process until we would either be ordered to accept those comments and respond to them.
Typically, a CEQA writ process, violations of CEQA are handled through writ of mandate, and that would be via petition. If there are any other types of injunctive orders or stays or whatever other actions they might be seeking, I couldn't venture to guess what they might do.
Is it within our purview today to, for sake of argument, if we were to feel that notice was not proper, what steps would the agency and the council have, would the council have to go back and address that?
You could renotice the matter. You could...
Would it be a vote to rescind our previous approval of...
It would need to be re-agendized. Renoticed, re-agendized.
Accept the comments, respond to the comments,
That's
back
correct.
on the agenda, vote again, move forward to the next step to introduce the ordinance.
Yes.
Just wondering, not that we're going to do that, but that's the procedure.
I got a
Mr. Weaver.
And refresh me, when the draft environmental document goes out, goes wide range of parties to receive it. Comments are received, they're addressed and incorporated in the final ER. There's public hearing at that time. When the final document is prepared with the answer to the comments incorporated therein, what is the responsibility of the agency or the council then? To have another public hearing, or simply to certify the EIR with the comments in there that give the decision makers all the information possible to make a decision on certification?
The Public Resources Code requires notification prior to, public notification prior to final adoption. And that is the Brown Act notification, which we
Yes.
typically provide for all of our, we're required to provide for all of our agenda items.
But once
That's
the public
correct.
has received it, do they now have another opportunity to come in and ask us to address the final EIR?
Technically, no, although by practice, and I say technically because what CEQA says specifically is that there is nothing that requires a lead agency to respond to comments not received during the comment period. And that's when it's out for either 30-day or 45-day comment. So there's not a requirement by CEQA. It's within the discretion of the lead agency and responsible agency to take comments during the hearing on the certification of the final EIR.
I'm just saying.
And it's commonly done, correct.
Within my 35 years, I've never heard of a final EIR having another hearing with comments put into a final EIR or a supplemental final EIR.
We do, by
I
practice,
just
and
don't
I think
remember.
Mr. Howard, exactly what he was going to
Maybe.
say,
But
by
he's got the
practice is
photographic memory. I
that
don't.
we do, and if you recall the town center, that's precisely what we did. We allowed public comments to be received during that hearing, and in fact, they were extensive. We developed responses, we put those responses in the record during the hearing on the final EIR.
Oh, I forgot.
Mr. Draymond, then Mr. Starbird.
Does anybody recall that, I don't know if I don't recall, I don't think Mr. Milano was here, but does anybody else seem to recall that when we were on this very matter last time, just before we went on vacation, I asked this exact question,
And?
this precise question, and the answer was, no, Mr. Draymond, all procedures were followed in terms of notification, and here is when it went out, we gave specific dates, et cetera, and I asked this question because I had received inquiry from a variety of people, mostly to do with the preservation community and historic community in our city,
DPSS.
that were saying that they were unaware of this until the last minute. And we were assured that we had complied in every way. And now this question is coming up, the identical question, this aspect of it, today, just a few weeks later, as though it is something brand new that we hadn't discussed 2 weeks ago, that it was something dropped to us from out of the heavens somewhere. I'm concerned about that.
Ms. Van Meiden.
Mr. Mayor, members of the agency, in recalling the discussion that we had, Councilman Draymond, that evening, there are two levels of notice, or two different types of notice, and one of the responses, there were actually three responses given, one by myself, one by Mr. Lanzafame, and another by Mr. Locacciato, and that is that for members of the public, there is no notice directly to them required, whereas for state agencies, it's a 10-day notice, so it's sort of a dual notification requirement pursuant to CEQA. Nonetheless, the government code required notice, the Brown Act required notice, still must be given, and that is simply what we've established here, is that those levels of notice were provided,
Mr. Starbird.
as they were with a DPSS.
Yeah, to be clear, the appropriate notice was given, in addition to supplemental notice to those people who were placed on the list. That written notice was given as well.
That's correct.
Jillian, did Mr. Henning, on behalf of his client, submit any comments on the CIR?
He did submit comments, and in reviewing that comment letter, he did not also within it place a written request that he be placed on an interested parties list, or that he be
And how
notified.
extensive were the comments, do you recall?
Well, I've got them here, and they were the comments numbered in the 70 or 80 pages of comments.
Mr. Quintero, then Mr.
Well, it's
Draymond.
my understanding that one of the letters did get through to Mr. Milano, is that correct? We didn't, one was,
That's the
came back, the
presumption.
other one came through, so I
Well, let's be
assume...
clear, it was not returned as not having been delivered.
Well, that's what we do to everyone.
No, you're
We mail
right.
letters
No, you're
to them.
right.
If they don't come back,
Right.
then we
You're
assume...
right.
that-
Presumed served, that's right.
Mr. Draymond.
Well, I have one more question, Mr. Chair, and it has to do with, oh, boy, I don't know whether it was this document or a previous, hang on one moment. No, it's not this document. I think it was, oh, wait. Yes, it's in essence asking the redevelopment agency at one point to set aside the issue until they have had an opportunity to review the document. I just want to make a comment as the chair of redevelopment. When did you receive this? It's dated January 8th. When did you, not this document, but when did you receive some sort of notice from Mr. Milano or his attorney saying that there is a problem and that they would like the GRA to set this aside, et cetera, for the reasons indicated?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, Mr. Draymond, I received it today at 10:26 a.m. via facsimile.
I'm not making this clear. When See, I see a date on these emails of November 5th.
You're referring to the email that was attached to
Yes,
the
I'm not
letter.
asking when did
I
you
see.
receive this particular piece that's in blue. When did the city first discover that they had some concerns about asking GRA to set this aside and so on? Today? Okay.
To set aside today.
I just want, just for the record, and the reason I'm saying is I'm the chair of GRA. I found out about this here. That an agency that I'm chairing is being asked to set something aside based on an issue that we dealt with 2 weeks ago here. So I'm just wondering, that's all.
Okay, let's go to the public, and all these issues we've discussed can perhaps sink in, and we will have a chance to discuss this again when the speakers are completed. The first speaker is Herbert Milano. How much time would you like, Mr. Milano?
Well, could I have 10 minutes? I try to
Sorry?
1 minute per one of the comments that I make.
I'm sorry, I
I
didn't
need
hear
10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Yeah.
I
Would that
think
be possible?
that's a bit on the...
I'll try to summarize it as much as I can because you already covered some of the issues that I wanted to present.
Let's do 5.
All right, thank you. My name is Herbert Milano, Mayor Najarian, Chairman Draymond, members of the City Council and the agency and city staff. I think that when the Brown Act was created, it had an intent. And the intent of the law was to give the public and those parties who are interested in participating in the decisions of council sufficient and adequate time. Now, sufficient and adequate time, according to the law, is, let's say, 72 hours before a meeting. And when we ask, and the public wants to be informed about something, then why the city would do the absolute minimum, should we say, this is what the law allows, and we will do nothing extra or above that. Now, the city does have a practice of going above and beyond. For example, you're not required to put the draft EIR on the web, but it is an incredibly valuable tool to have it on the web as soon as it is published. But yet the final EIR is not. The draft EIR is put on the web, and the final EIR is not. And then it comes with regard to the proper or written notification. So I sent out an email specifically saying, my attorney and I would like ample time to prepare responses to the EIR, right? Of this project, and would like to be informed promptly as soon as the scheduled time is firmed up. In other words, we're asking for the city to take the initiative, at least to look. You wrote 72 comments and another 60 that I sent out. We spent a considerable amount of time and expense in preparing this. And we're the only 2 public comments out of the whole city of 207,000 people. Right? The interested parties, the attorneys, the developers, the investors, and everybody will get their due and they will be notified. I'm assuming maybe even they get called up. But the public, right, who wants to say, look, we have issues here with this EIR that have been brushed aside, and they were. And if I had the opportunity to do that, I will show you the places where you give you an example of the type of arguments which are called the straw man. I present an argument, you create a straw man, and you attack the straw man, but not attack or address the issue that is presented. The EIR has some significant arguments like that under any class in critical thinking would be tossed aside as inept, truly inept. But that's not the issue we're discussing here. We're discussing the issue of proper notification and what the goals and objectives are of an agency to ensure that there is proper participation by the public. Now, we wouldn't have gone through all that expense just to play around and say, wait a second. Of course we were surprised. We're absolutely surprised because it was 2 days ago that I finally went out to the and said, what happened to the final EIR? He said, well, it's here. It's been here since December the 18th. You see, we have the 2 issues. We have the Verdugo Gardens issue and we have this one. Obviously, we were expecting at least the Verdugo Gardens to come first and the City Center 2 to come after, because sequentially that's the way they were. But we haven't received any notifications. So I took the initiative to go out there in person and say, what happened to this? And that's where I became notified, which was about 3 days ago. Or, Thursday or Friday, I forgot the exact date. So the intent of the law is to get participation by the public. So you can say, we're going to go strictly by the rule, go by the absolute minimum that the law permits, and we'll proceed. And these are issues that are going to have a significant investment with regard to the investors and the developers, and a significant impact to the public. I mentioned a couple of things that were relevant to this area that is having such a tremendous impact on at least those two areas of parks and traffic congestion. But at least if a city is geared to serve the public, you would inform the public in an effective way that says, we will engage the public effectively, not say, we're going to be absolutely to the letter of the law, and at exactly 72 hours plus 1 minute, we'll post the information and not less. And that's basically what we're finding with regard to effective information. The second item that, if I may finish, is the issue concerning the campaign contributions, and item number 8 with regard to Mr. Weaver's campaign contributions receiving from the Amity Group. But under cursory information, you're not going to find the Amity Group in here as a contributor. You find the Amity Group as AMA Construction. You find the Amity Group as Chemtex Corporation. And, of course, they hire Mr. Khan. Khan Consulting gives money to Mr. Weaver. Hollywood Production, Ops Corporation. The same situation. The law specifically states, with regard to aggregating all of those and reporting it effectively. But the other thing that I have a problem with is circumventing the intent of the law. And the intent of the law is the proper notification that the individuals who are contributing to the campaign of someone who's going to make a decision be absolutely clear to the public. That's the intent.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. Mr. Yusefian.
I have a question from Mr. Milano. Mr. Milano?
Milano.
I see that in here, all I see is Mr. Weaver's 460s. Did you take an opportunity to look at the rest of ours?
Cursory.
Or you just
But I decided to just
pick one?
I decided to just pick one because that was sufficient to bring my point across.
Okay.
You're not picking on Mr. Weaver.
Oh, me? Pick on Mr. Weaver? Never.
It could be, it could have been any of us on there. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Starberg.
Mr. Mayor, on the first issue that Mr. Milano raised, I guess it could sound reasonable to somebody listening in that we should be able to give Mr. Milano personalized service on a notice. You should know that we had 250 people left us their name and their addresses to contact relative to the EIR coming to you. Now, not a legal requirement over and above the public notice, but we did send them all letters. And in that period of time, in some period of time, apparently one of Mr. Milano's addresses changed, which he is now updated. But I guess we didn't think to touch base with him and ask him if his addresses had changed before we sent out the letters. Maybe it should have been personalized to that extent. But 200 to 250 people we sent letters to. People who asked to please get a letter and let them know, over and above what the law requires. We can't personalize every notice. Somebody might like an email, somebody might like letter, somebody might like a phone call, somebody might like 3 weeks, somebody might like 4 weeks. We contacted and sent letters to everybody who gave us their names, and in one case, an individual gave us 2 addresses for which one letter was returned. We have to presume the other letter got through, and we sent those on this matter.
Thank you. Next speaker, Mr. Draymond.
I have a question. I guess my question is to Mr. Lanzafame. So, what happened when Mr. Hagani's email was forwarded to you?
I looked to see that Mr. Milano was included on the list, and we sent him the letter.
I mean, was there a response?
I did not respond to Mr. Hagani, or I can't remember if I responded to Mr. Hagani. I did not respond to Mr. Milano.
Thank you.
Mr. Yusefian.
Mr. Mayor, in all due respect to our city manager and also to our good staff, having been subject to a notice that was sent and never got there, I think Mr. Milano has a point to prove. Yes, there were 250 people we sent letters to. There were only 2 people who talked about this project. As a matter of fact, I was very much surprised that day because I expected Mr. Milano to be here. And when I did not see Mr. Milano here, I assumed he had all his questions answered, and that's why he's not here. I thought either that or you're on vacation, one or the other. But I think this is another item that the issue isn't this case. The issue is the way the city goes about notifying people. If there's 500 people, but only 2 people show up consistently about a project, don't care what the project is, those are the people who are the most interested. And when an email comes to Mr. Hagani and then goes to Mr. Lanzafame, it's very obvious you didn't get 250 other emails from other people, did you? No. You got it from only this guy. Now, yes, he may have moved, but maybe somebody could have sent him a little email message, because you know the email works for sure because you got one from him saying, the final draft is going to be done such and such in time. And that would have resolved that issue. And I think those are the type of things that I hope as we go forward in 2008, we will resolve some of these issues, because there will be more projects coming. But I think people who are interested in some of these projects, they need to be given the extra attention and given the notice that these items are available. Come and get it. I literally had to ask several times to get the Verdugo, get their EIR, because apparently Mr. Milano had gotten a hold of it, but the rest of us didn't have it, and he kept talking about it. We didn't know what the heck he was talking about. So until we got a copy of it. So, and we changed procedures. So from now on, as the public gets the draft, we also get the draft. But I think it's important as we go forward to give proper notice to people who are really, really interested, not just all the people who live around something who are not affected, or they're not people who actually have a stake in the project. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Allen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Chair of the joint meeting. I'm Barry Allen. Actually, I guess I'm one of those 250 people. I got mine, and I got mine for today. And I understand that looking at numbers, there's no guarantee how many people will show up. First of all, those people you would think had a specific interest. But then again, this meeting is in the afternoon. Maybe they prefer it to be in the evening. Who knows? And obviously, they didn't think that they could do written comments. But your point, Mr. Yusefian, that those who were interested showed up. Those who were interested did show up. And those who were interested spoke. And I think that really is the issue. And when we look at, was it published? Yeah. Was it put on the bulletin board? Yeah. Were the notices gone out to the general public? Yeah. But, the general public really isn't interested unless it has to do with the hillside, or it has to do with fences, or something that has a direct impact. This is just a downtown building, and they don't really think about it. But I would like to go to what I understand this is a public hearing specifically on this project. And I would like to support this project, and I would like to refer to the fact that it is really a linchpin of a new downtown. Without this project, you've got nothing. You may have a hotel here, a new building there, an apartment here, and a condo there. This is the linchpin. This is City Center 2. This is what will make downtown. This is what will bring people into Glendale. And I think that we need to move on, and we need to approve the mechanism to make this into an ordinance and get it moving on. Otherwise, your other developers are going to look at this, and they're going to say, why do we want to invest money in Glendale? Really, why do they want to do it? They can invest their money elsewhere. And then Glendale will be sitting there trying to figure out how we're going to pay all of our exorbitant salaries, because there's no new money to do it. This is what you need. This is what you need to put your hats on, make that vote, and bring it to fruition. Thank you. Barry Allen.
Thank you. Next speaker is Al Hoffman.
Mayor Najarian, Chairman Draymond, Council, and Redevelopment Agency and staff. I came today to speak on, really for, I guess, being a member of the Downtown Specific Plan Public Study Group, I worked with Barry McComb a lot in the Alex Theater, and when he was here, when we had this approval, I guess, last month, he was very excited about the fact this hotel was going to be there and it would provide a large meeting area. And then it was said, oh, that's not really going to be. And so I said, boy, we really need to do that. Now, he said they wanted something for 1,000 people. I don't know. The Hilton, does that hold 1,000 people? But he really wants something like the Hilton has for a large meeting room. I spoke to Rodney Kahn this evening about that, and he said, well, the fly in the ointment is parking. Do you have to have so many spaces per area of this thing? And I said, well, then he also noted that the parking that's designed for this City 2 is all valet. And my point was that if we did have this expanded, if we could get the hotel that's going to be developed there, have a large meeting room, not only large but also divisible into smaller meeting rooms that community people like our coordinating council we could use, and we wouldn't have to go meet in a church or something like that. It would be really great if we could meet downtown. I think this would be a great thing to develop. And my point was with Rodney, if we did that and we did a waiver on the parking spaces and it was still valet, if there was some big event, we could literally have valet. They could use Galleria parking, they could use exchange parking, could even pay Mr. Caruso for parking. He'd love that. If there was some kind of a event that we needed more parking for a specific event. But I really hope that this large meeting area could be somehow implemented in this development for City 2. And I think the first thing we did on our study group was that no matter what we do down there, we had all kinds of plans. We said the number one thing we have to do is figure out how to handle traffic. That's the number one thing, and we need public transportation before we build anything. And I'm not sure how much traffic is being considered. And then on Mr. Draymond's comment about having places for galleries, museums, and things like that, that was one of our study group's proposals, was at the Dorn Platz building north of the Alex, that all the ground floor be galleries, a museum, and things like that. And we even proposed that maybe the whole thing ought to be redone with low-income housing above it to make it a mixed-use facility and have like lofts and things where artists and people like that who can't afford a lot of money would be living downtown. And so there is a lot of things to consider in that, and that would be, I think, augment this whole thing. But as far as this development goes, I certainly hope we do it, and I hope we consider somehow having the developer increase the meeting space in this area. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll.
I just wanted to comment that the speaker forgot to mention the Orange Street Garage, which is a half block away and is empty as we speak. So there's absolutely lots of parking in the area available.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mark Steres.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Steres. I'm an attorney for the applicant and developer, and with Brown, Winfield, and Canzaneri in downtown Los Angeles. I listened carefully to the staff report and your discussion, and I wanted to respond to these statements and issues raised by Mr. Milano regarding this procedural issue for the CEQA process. We've reviewed the materials, and I've spoken with the city attorney's office and concur that procedurally everything was done proper regarding notice and processing the final EIR for certification, and would urge you to take action today on introducing the development agreement. The process was exactly what CEQA looks for. We had a comprehensive environmental impact report. We had a time for comments. Comments were received by Mr. Milano and the attorney, John Henning. There were 195 comments made on this EIR by Mr. Henning, and 32 comments categorized by the EIR consultant by Mr. Milano. They were responded to, and in the final EIR, questions have been raised about challenges to this EIR. We'll find out if a challenge is made, and the judge will review the EIR and find whether or not it was adequate in its substance. But procedurally, I think the judge will find that all procedures were taken care of and were adequate and substantially met. So with that, again, we'd urge you to take action today, introducing the ordinance on the development agreement. I heard comments from at least one council member about going forward with policy, and not specifically for this project. I just wanted to reassure, from the developer's point of view, we've looked at this, and we think procedurally this project has been, is legally adequate. Thank you.
Thank you. Rodney Kahn, followed by Greg Astoria.
Good afternoon, Chairman, agency members, Mayor, and city staff. My name is Rodney Kahn. My offices are here in the city of Glendale. A little tough to hear or understand because I'm fighting a cold. In terms of a few comments I'd like to make, I did speak to Mr. Hoffman about meeting space as part of the project component of expanding actually the meeting space which is being proposed. That's certainly something that we would look at. I know Mr. McComb spoke at the last hearing. He talked about, as was pointed out, a large number, or a very high number, to be able to satisfy what may be some of their needs. I don't know if we could fulfill that requirement where it would be a space for 1,000 people to meet, but certainly if the City Council thought in the future, as this project moves forward with a hotel operator, what their needs are, what their requirements are, to start looking at expanded meeting space, that's certainly something we're willing to look at. The original proposal, when we started looking at it, that prevented us from doing that had to do with the intense level of parking that's required for meeting space or meeting room. And as Mr. Hoffman pointed out, in terms of us providing valet parking, that may help or assist us with satisfying some of that parking requirement for additional meeting room. So we are willing to talk and discuss that as well. A couple other points. This development agreement, or at least the introduction, I know that we had not really touched upon what that was about. At the last hearing on December 18th, I talked about different incentives, and this development agreement is a tool for implementing the downtown specific plan and the incentives. One of the incentives was a hotel, which is the first-class four-star hotel, which we will be providing on-site. The other was the public open space incentive. And I just want to reemphasize at this hearing as well that we have a large component of public open space that's available to the general public in the form of a mini park on the corner of Orange and Wilson, 4,000 to 5,000 square feet in size, that has an art component, that has a water feature, that has outdoor seating for the general public. And the other public open space that we have provided is in the form of a plaza that interacts with the City Center 1 Plaza, and as I mentioned last time, creates a bit of an open space network. So in terms of the development agreement, those are two of the components. Two other components that we are not asking for, but that I believe we would qualify under, is the signature or landmark design for our building. We are not asking for that incentive, yet I do believe that this building would qualify for it. And secondly, or lastly, relating to a LEED certification or looking at the LEED analysis for the building, that's something we are still doing, even though we are not asking for the incentive as it relates to this development agreement. I wanted to add those few remarks. Thank you for your consideration. We ask that you move forward today on the introduction of this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Astorian?
Mr. Kahn covered most of what I had to say.
Thank you. Thank you. That's the last card I have. I'm going to close the public hearing. Mr. Quintero, then Mr. Weaver.
Okay, well, I'm prepared to introduce the ordinance at 1A, but before I do, and I'm sure there's comments, in terms of Mr. Milano, I think he has had an opportunity to provide input both in written form and verbally, and there have been multiple meetings in addition to the one that we had at the end of the year. And overall, let me say that I think the public is in support and approves of this mixed-use project, because everyone that I've talked to in the past few months has been very excited about the hotel and the accompanying condo. In terms of the issue of traffic and congestion, remember that, in fact, we're going to have an extra lane on Wilson, an entire lane dedicated to the hotel and through traffic, as well as the entire block from Orange to Brand, and then half of Orange is also going to be widened. So there's going to be plenty of I actually think there may be less traffic. At times it may be busy because it is a good-sized hotel, but overall I think it's going to probably lessen some of the congestion at that intersection. Then in terms of parks in the downtown, this is a hotel. It's going to be a 4-star hotel with all of the amenities. The condo is going to have a pool, it's going to have a gym, it's going to have a public area. I don't think the types of people staying at this location are going to be particularly affected by parks. And once again, we have, in passing the developer fees and the impact fees, we're going to have millions of dollars that we'll be able to use for parks in those designated areas where they're most used or most needed. So, like I say, I'm prepared to introduce the ordinance today. I think we need to get this done. It's been a very, very long haul, and we need to just go ahead and complete this, and let's get going. Let's get it built. That lot has been empty for as long as I can remember. I mean, we need to do something not only for that location, but for the resident, or rather the businesses there in Mid-Brand and the Alex, and they're all going to profit by this hotel. So there's no reason to hold it up any longer.
Mr. Weaver, then Mr. Yusefian.
Well, I gather you introduced the ordinance. Took the words out of my mouth. I was going to do it and say basically the same thing. I've heard no negative comments on this plan. The ones most excited about it are the merchants in Mid-Brand, who feared that with Americana coming in, they would suffer great losses of business. And this, I think, just goes to show that this council or agency was not going to sit still and let that happen. That this will be a stimulus downtown, and it's just going to feed other. Americana fed this hotel, condo complex, and that will feed others. We will have a lively downtown, a 24-hour downtown, which this community needs. It's never had in my lifetime. And yes, I do remember when it was Webb's, and then when it burned down.
And you had nothing to do with that?
No, I did not. And I still remember
50s?
Back there in the 40s and the 50s, the sidewalks rolled up at sunset. Nothing was open on Sunday. Not even gas stations were open on Sunday. So we're going to invigorate downtown Brand for the first time in my lifetime, which I think is a great thing for the community.
Mr. Yusefian?
Question from the attorney. This is separate from the EIR. This is just a development agreement. So if there's a challenge on the EIR, would that affect this?
Well, it's a separate entitlement, but its impact environmentally was analyzed in the EIR that was certified.
Right, but...
So if there's a challenge to the EIR, typically that would just be to the EIR's analysis, the adequacy of its analysis of the project. The entitlements could also be separately,
Because in here it's mostly about what they're going to do, how they're going to build it, and it's the agreement on development.
Right, and as Mr. Howard was just mentioning, with the town center, of course, it's the EIR that is the underpinning of the project itself and its entitlement. So if that is successfully challenged, that would prevent the applicant from moving forward under the development agreement entitlement.
Okay, and the vote on this in no shape or fashion has anything to do, since it's a city council vote, it does not kick in any of the issues with...
Under 84-308, that's correct.
Right, okay. Further questions? If I'm going to go back and check on my 460 forms, just to make sure. If it turned out that I have received something within 12 months, or violated the law, how do we proceed with that?
With you coming into my office and we talk about it.
Okay.
We need to look at it. There's a number of elements. There's a willfulness, there's a knowledge element, whether you willfully and knowingly received or obtained a campaign contribution. There's a 12-month time frame also involved, so we need to talk about it.
Okay.
I can't answer the question here and now.
And by then, would you also look and see which parts were agency and which parts were council?
We will.
Passed? Okay.
And we'll also have an opinion for you within the next 1 to 2 weeks on the whole issue of the application of the Housing Authority and GRA.
Thank you.
John.
Well, thank you. I'm not only on the record for supporting this project, but in part, I was aware of this project when I was running for office, which was recently, and obviously in it. And one of the key questions and comments that we were discussing at that time was how to grow a new downtown where we don't have one right now, and what that would lead to. Many of the comments that I could make were already made, so I won't rehash those issues, but if you're of a mind that you want to see Glendale have a vibrant downtown, and to me that means a demand for arts and culture venues, retail venues, and entertainment venues, etc., then you need bodies in the downtown who have the disposable cash to take advantage of those things. And in addition to that, the downtown participation of a hotel and the residents that will live in the residential portion of this also demanding that the downtown be clean and maintained, and that things like crime are low, and that graffiti is absent, and that all of the problems that we generally see in downtown areas are kept at a minimum. They become stakeholders, and that is how you will grow a downtown. So I said when that very large model was wheeled in a glass case and brought before us a couple of weeks ago that I felt we were looking at the ground zero for the rebirth of our downtown area, and I believe that this is the project that will get us there. So I support it.
Thank you. And briefly, I'll make my comments. What was the term? Linchpin or kingpin? Linchpin. This is I do believe this is the linchpin to downtown. I like to brag about this project even more than the Americana now, because the Americana, we've said it and we've talked about it enough, but people look at you and say, well, what are you, a one-hit wonder? Oh, no. We've got the 4-star hotel coming in with luxury condos, and it's going to be right downtown. It's really going to be an excellent addition. And I echo, I think there's not much more to be said. All my colleagues have mentioned the superlatives on this project. And I don't know if there's anything else left to be done. Mr. Quintero introduced
I'll introduce the ordinance at 1A.
And so be it.
Will we adjourn for the city council?
Second.
Council's adjourned.
Will we adjourn for the redevelopment agency?
Second.
Adjourned.